All right. Thank you for being here. Jeremiah Gilbert, photographer, travel writer. How many bags do you usually travel with?
3 counting the camera bag.
So you're going to have to check something.
Yeah, I used to travel lighter and carry on, but not since marriage.
So y'all go when you're doing your travel writing, you're going together?
Yes, absolutely. We actually met on separate tours in Tunisia. And so she also loved traveling. So pre 2009 was solo me. So the photos and writing was just me. But since 2010, it's been the two of us.
Oh, nice. Would you say that helps the relationship or not?
Well, fortunately, like I said, she loves to travel. In fact, when we got serious, I asked her to make a list of everywhere she's been and where she's willing to go back to. And we made an agreement that she would be willing to go back to certain places that I hadn't been as long as she could stay one country up in the count. Though last year, her anniversary gift to me was to let me go ahead of her. So now I'm 3 countries ahead. But for us, it's been great because, I really enjoy planning. She's really good at navigation. Um, and so we just sort of play to each other's strengths. And then we're both open to, hey, if it's not going to plan today, we can just adapt and adjust. She also likes to take photos, but her photos are very different than mine. So it's interesting at the end of the day to see, oh, that's how you took a picture of that. I didn't think of that angle or something like that. So it's kind of it's fun. It's never competitive. We just rely on each other's strengths.
How do you pick the places that you're going to go?
2 ways. So before we met, my approach is pretty much, if I've not been, let's go. Um, she's more, okay, we just came from Europe. So the next trip, let's go to Central America. Or, we've just come from the Caribbean. So next trip should be different. So that sort of organizes us a little bit. And then normally what happens is I'll get an idea, I'll see something or hear about something, I'll mention it, and then if she doesn't say no immediately, then I'll just start researching it and start planning it, and then I'll pretty much have a rough draft together, and then I'll mention it again. Still doesn't say no. Okay, here's what I planned for summer, or here's what I planned for winter.
If you were going to narrow down a question to ask about a place you were going to see if it was safe or somewhere that you were wanting to go, what are, maybe it doesn't have to be one, but what are your maybe top 3 things you would ask either through research or somebody that's been there about a place to tell if it's somewhere you wanted to go?
Yeah, if it's someone who's been, I will ask them, what are the sites and what are the sites that maybe aren't as well known? Because I have nothing against going to the main tourist attractions, but I also like to see something different. I've asked cab drivers to pull off to the side of the road to photograph something, and they're like, "You're the first person ever to ask me to stop here." I'm like, "Hey, it's cool." I like to look a bit into the history. I'm really into, architecture and ruins, past civilizations. So, is that an element? Doesn't have to be, but if it is, I, really am drawn towards that. Um, and then, just do some research in terms, like you said, is it safe? What's the visa process? Because sometimes, the application, it can be a 10-page application. It can take, I've heard Algeria is a 6-month process. So, be aware of that. And then as a bonus, I'd also look into flights, because I've had some trips planned where to get there was more expensive than the whole trip. And so, okay, maybe I'll have to figure out a different way, or maybe a different time to go. Is there a time where flights are cheaper, or should I wait till maybe I'm based out of London and then it's cheaper? Because at a certain point, there's only so much I'm willing to spend on airfare, and when it exceeds the trip, it just doesn't seem worth it.
Yeah. Do you string together different locations often, or is that the only way you do it, or do you go single
It
places at a time?
it varies. We tend to piece it together again, because then there's just one big airfare, the international. So we fly out of Los Angeles usually, and then once you're in a location, so let's say Europe, there's lots of inexpensive flights or trains or some form of public transit. So we try to piece together 2 or 3 locations each trip. Just to we did a couple of years ago, during COVID, we started watching YouTube travel channels, and we found out about European river cruising. And a channel we watched does they did a Christmas market cruise, and we thought, oh, that would be really cool. I really like that, and we did. But the flaw was, we flew here to Amsterdam, did a week-long cruise, and then flew home, and it was just, that was a bit excessive. That was a long way to go for just a week. Glad we did it, but normally we would have planned much more and it'd been at least a 3 or 4 week trip.
When you go, are you going on assignment? Like you've already sold the idea of the story to someone, or do you do it and then sell?
I do it and then sell. So, for instance, this we just came back. We sailed up the west coast of Africa in May and June, and so as soon as I came back, well, actually during the trip, I took the laptop with me. I reached out to a magazine I've wrote a lot for before and said, "Hey, I just visited this great site. I can write up something for you. Are you interested?" And I'm doing the same thing for another magazine right now. I've written for them before. They reached out to me. Oh, you're getting ready for some anniversary issue. Oh, do you have something for us? And I'm just like, hey, as a matter of fact. So usually, I mean, occasionally, I have gone on with something in mind or something that I've pitched because I knew I was going to go see something. But often it's after the fact. I'll go, I'll visit, see what strikes my fancy. Did I get some good photos? Can I write something interesting? And then I'll pitch it and see if anyone's interested.
Is that how most travel writers do it, where they do the work and then pitch it, or are most of them
Yeah.
working for a magazine?
Yeah, most do the opposite. Most typically have an assignment that takes them somewhere. And then while they're there, they may do some extra things and then pitch those as bonuses. For me, I like the flexibility of sort of not having the pressure, just going out and seeing what I see. But it adds the added, but there's no guarantee. Yeah, like I said, I'm working on a couple of pieces right now through magazines that know me and I've worked with before. But other pieces, you just sort of hit them with ideas and they're just not interested.
So your average trip then would be a week or two, or would you do longer than a week? Are you away from home more than you are at home?
These days we've slowed down a bit. I'd say the average trip is probably about 3 weeks. This last trip was 5 weeks. Um, in the past, it was much longer. Um, we've done up to 3-4 months at a time, but these days it's we like we find if we plan it well, 3 weeks is probably a really good time. And I said, this past trip I happened to take the laptop with me, so I was writing and editing as I went along. Often I don't, so we'll do about a 3 week trip. Then I'll come home, edit the photos, see if I have anything to write about. Um, so it's a little different. So longer trip, I'll take the laptop with me, so I don't have thousands of unedited photos when I get home.
Yeah. I follow your Instagram. I like that. And I often wonder, are you there now? Did you just get back from there? Is this something that you took recently, or do you have if somebody calls you and says, we're looking for a story about this place and you've been there within a year or two, can you use those pictures or do you need to go back? What's the freshness time of travel writing?
Gotcha. Well, for the Instagram, what I'm doing now is I'm posting trips, each trip at a time. So the photos you've been seeing lately have been from the winter trip, which was Australia, New Zealand.
Okay.
And then soon it's going to switch, and then you'll start seeing the photos from the African trip. And so I've sort of followed that pattern now. Um, in terms of freshness, it sort of depends upon the location. So, again, if it's some ruins in an area, if you've been within the year and a half, it's probably fine. There's nothing that's changed. Like you said, the Christmas markets, obviously that's, once a year. And, we went in November. You should have something together as soon as you get back because, they're going to want to publish that in December while everyone's thinking of Christmas. It makes no sense doing a feature on Christmas markets in June. And, the following year, the photos are probably still fine, but you would have to do some research in terms of, which dates are they open? Is the market open? Especially post COVID, there's some
Mm.
situations, or when we went, I was at one location the day before that market opened. So for me, it was great. Just sort of enjoyed the city and took photos. But if I wanted to write about that Christmas market, I don't have photos. I was there a day early, so I would have to go back.
What kind of camera do you use the most, or do you have? Well, yeah, I guess that's a big enough question. What kind of equipment are you working with mainly?
My normal setup these days is I like, at least with the photography, I try to travel light. So I tend to take one camera, two, at most three lenses. So for instance, this most recent trip, my main camera these days is the Nikon Z6. That was their first mirrorless camera, and I just really enjoyed it. I resisted mirrorless for a while, but when I finally dove in, I used this camera, and I just thought it was great. So it's still my main camera. And then in terms of lenses, I really like to shoot wide angle. So in terms of optics, 35 to 40 millimeters is about what the eye sees. So anything less than that is considered wide angle, and anything more than that's considered a zoom. So I tend to take a wide angle lens. So right now the 14 to 30 millimeter, which can go very wide. And then I'll take a zoom with me. I've got a 24 to 200, and that pretty much covers everything I need. If I'm going to go on a safari, for instance, then I've got a much bigger lens that'll go up to 500 millimeters. If I'm going to do some, like when I was in Taiwan, I went to a series of night markets, which they're known for. So in that case, I have a lens of 50 millimeter f1.4. It lets in a lot of light. It focuses very quickly. So in that situation, I knew I was going to visit those, so I took that lens with me. And that's pretty much, like I said, two, three, at most three lenses. The third lens, if it's like the 50 millimeter, that's a pretty small lens. I can kind of tuck it away because I want to be able to, have a camera bag on me that's not too big, not too heavy, because I may be, on my feet all day. And so I just, I end up cleaning the camera a lot if I have to keep changing lenses. Uh, some instances, like this summer trip, I took two camera bags with me, my full bag and a much smaller bag. Because I was in a situation where I only thought I was going to need one lens. I just one camera, one lens, small bag, much more mobile. Um, and if I was wrong, uh, this wasn't the right lens, I just adapted and tried to get creative.
Do you do a lot of like the close-up work? So what do they call that? A micro lens, or is that? Yeah.
Oh, macro.
Yeah. Macro.
Yeah, not too much. I do it creatively, but when I travel, I don't do it too much. I don't take a macro with me.
Do you have when you're traveling, are you thinking this is a shot I want to get, or are you just going with whatever is presented? Like, do you think I'm going to the Taj Mahal, so I want to get this angle of the Taj Mahal or a different angle, or do you plan that out or go with it?
Sort of both. What I tend to do is I'll look at a location and I'll Google image and see what are various photos that have been taken, or I'll follow some photographers that shoot in that area or have taken photos just to kind of get an idea. Um, but I also, I'm a big believer in pre-visualizing shots. So when I go somewhere, whether I'm familiar with it or not, if I'm able to, I like to sort of wander around, look around. I don't take out the camera. I just sort of see the situation, how crowded is it? What sort of lighting is it? And then sort of mentally just sort of think, okay, I think these are the sorts of shots I want to take. Then I'll bring the camera out. Um,
Mm.
so it's sort of a combination. I mean, I tend to Google image just to give me a sense of what a location is going to look like. But again, the day you're there, the time you're there, it could be, the lighting could be different. It could be raining.
Mm.
Things like that will also affect how I'm going to photograph.
Hmm. Do you travel with a tripod? And if so, do you need a monopod, or is that just extra equipment?
I typically don't. Um, Again, it depends upon the trip. So occasionally I'll need to get creative. So for instance, Wuzhen in China is what they call a water town. So basically an older community built around rivers. And it's a huge day trip location, particularly for the Chinese. It's not too far from Shanghai. Um, but we had the idea of staying a couple nights and being able to go and explore it on our own. Because anywhere that's really popular for the day trippers, it's great to be there in the morning or in the evening, before they arrive or after. And so
Mm.
we're there, and Wuzhen is also known for their lanterns. So after dark, it was just beautiful. But here I am, handheld. Um, but because of the rivers that run through it, there are a lot of bridges. So what I tended to do was I'd set the camera up on the bridge with a longer exposure time and sort of do some night photography that way. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't often do night. So sometimes you have the night markets, but there obviously you need to be handheld and quick. There are some trips. I've got a trip coming up that I've realized a tripod would be a really good choice for, but I'm trying to decide, could I get away with a monopod? The new cameras and lenses have really good. Uh, they can go. You can reduce the shutter speed considerably, compared to the old days. So, maybe a monopod will be enough. Yeah, I would rather travel with a monopod, but I mean, I do have a few tripods if I need them. I tend not to travel with them because, like I said, in terms of photography, I like to try to travel light.
Do you have like a signature shot that you use, or like a angle or things you like to take pictures of more than others?
I'm probably most known because I do shoot wide angle. I do shoot pretty wide, and that allows a lot to be added to the scene. And so, I like to incorporate when I can foreground, leading lines. Uh, a friend of mine told me, yeah, when he thinks of me taking photographs, the thing he remembers is I told him once, never forget to look up. We tend to shoot just straight ahead. And
Mhm.
occasionally you just all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's just an incredible, angle or shot in front of me. I do enjoy bringing in different angles and applying a little geometry, as it were. Um, so I would say that's probably what I'm most known for, and it's easier to do that with like architectural. There's already angles, for you to play with. Yeah, I was in a fort in Sao Tome. Same thing. I knew what it was most known for was its lighthouse, so I went and explored that and took a few creative shots. But then I went back to the main quarters and remembered my own advice. I looked up, ooh, there's a nice shot. Let me position this just right. Um, in fact, yeah, the first solo photo exhibition I ever did focused on every photo. It was an international collection, but everything had been shot with the wide angle lens because that's what I'm most comfortable with for some reason. I'm less confident when I zoom. I don't know why. It's just become my thing.
Nice. Do you have any like subject matter, like sewer covers or trash corrals, old barns that when you see them, whether you use it in your travel writing or not, that you're like, hey, this is going to be a good coffee table book one day?
Yeah, I definitely photograph doors and windows too much.
Mm.
I've always enjoyed those, whether it be dereliction. So there's lots of interesting textures going on. I started off, I first learned photography in the mid 80s. So, film was the only choice. And I was taught how to develop black and white film. So I didn't know color. So I really got into texture, contrast, things like that.
Mm.
So I do find myself being pulled to that. Or sometimes it's just, there's something unique to this area. I remember I think it was in Uruguay, and the way they write the numbers for the houses is very unique to that region. So that I photographed for that. So that's always am drawn to. And as I mentioned, I love ruins. So anywhere, whether it be something like Machu Picchu, or it could be, as you said, a derelict barn. I mean, I can go to town on that. You could leave me there for a few hours. Uh,
Yeah.
there's a train graveyard in Bolivia that these trains
Oh,
were just left there to rust and rot. And I was there for an hour and a half. I could have stayed all day. I absolutely loved it.
wow. I have to look up some of your train pics. My wife is in the railroad, and that would be good. I'll check that out. Do you have those on your website?
I do. In fact, I'd be glad to send you the link.
Okay. Good, good. If the photography started in the 80s and traveling, when did the traveling start? After the
The,
photography?
yeah, the serious travel didn't start till about 2005. So I did photography more as a hobby. It was just sort of, I enjoyed it, go out, take the occasional photo, pop out for a weekend or something. Um, and then, after grad school, I was a part-time professor. And, the challenge with that is, you have to work at multiple colleges, and summer is not optional, And then around 2005, situations changed. And I realized, okay, I could start to travel, internationally. Up until then, it pretty much been domestic. And I'm one of those. I just I like to just dive in. So my first big trip was Tibet, and that was the trip that changed me. One, I went from film to digital because I wasn't sure about the situation with X-rays, or can I
Mm.
get film if I run out of rolls. And then I went from mostly shooting black and white to shooting mostly color. And it was just that combination. And then just, it's such an amazing area that I realized, oh, okay, I think I have a focus for my photography now. It's not just some random, I go out and shoot some interesting textures or something. I think I have a focus now. And so, I wrote my first website after that trip. So sort of told the story of the trip, and then there was links to various photos. And so that sort of was the genesis of the photography focusing on travel and then also writing about it. And so that just sort of, I did that for many years. The first several, about 10 years worth of travel went to that website. Um, and then, so now we're around 2015. I changed the way I changed the website and then focused more on the photography aspect of it, less about the writing. And then 2019, I started to think, okay, I'm sort of missing the writing. So I started, writing about it again. And then it just sort of, you know, reignited, as it were. And then that's when I started submitting, pieces to magazines and put together my first book. Um, because also by then I figured, okay, I've got about 15 years of travel behind me. I think I have enough stories to fill a book.
Hmm.
Let's
Hmm.
give it a try.
When you do the travel writing, do you write it while you're there? Like, do you journal during the trip, or is it more looking back on it, like looking at the pictures that you're going to select and then for whatever the story is, and then creating the story to match the pictures, or are you picking pictures to match your story?
It can be a combination of both. I do journal and I do take notes, particularly like if a conversation I want to remember or some specific details, and then it can vary. So, for instance, my first book was a series of travel tales over those 15 years at the time, and so that was more just sort of looking back. Oh, remember that time this happened, or I spent my 40th birthday in Paris with no ID and no money because I was pickpocketed on the metro,
Nice.
or there's a time in Bolivia I was smuggled across the checkpoint because no one told me I needed my passport, things like that. Uh, versus the most recent book was, okay, I wanted to write about returning to travel, after 2 years post COVID. What's different? What's changed? What's the same? So that one I actually wrote, as I was going along, or just, right as I returned from the trip, I'd write about it. And then, as you say, in that case, I would then find photos. Oh, I mentioned this location. I should include a photo or two. In terms of like articles for magazines, it depends. Piece I'm working on right now, I realized as I was writing it, I mentioned something, a feature, but I hadn't included a photo of it. So I went back. I know I took a photo, found the
Hmm.
photo, edited it. I mentioned it. I should include it in this set of photos. So it can go both ways.
What do you think your percentage of photos taken to photos used is?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a meme that goes around that's, back in the film days, you'd have a roll of 24 photos. And if you took one or two really good ones, you consider that a success. And now you can take thousands of photos. And if you have one or two really good photos, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
that
so
digital
for
film.
exactly. So for me, I would say it used to be maybe less than 10%. Now I'm becoming more aware and I'm trying to consciously take fewer photos. I'm trying to, I want to make sure, I can kind of get a sense of if it's right or not, or if I'm repeating myself, or if I want to try something different. So I'm now, I would say maybe 20 to 30%, just in just in the fact that rather than taking 10 photos of this look of this particular shot, I'm only going to take two or three now. And occasionally it bites me because maybe the lighting was bad, or I didn't see something. But usually I just prefer it. It kind of, like I said, it kind of takes me back to the film days, and just sort of like, yeah, I've got thousands of photos on this memory card, but I don't necessarily want to go through thousands of photos when I get home. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try to be a little more precise. And like I said, it depends. I mentioned the night markets in Taiwan. I probably used a majority of the photos I took. I just sort of just in the zone. I knew what I wanted to do, and I came back with a set I was really, really happy with. Uh, Other times, like I said, maybe it's a challenging lighting situation, or it's just really crowded with people. So there, I may take more photos because I'm just trying to, maybe if I change this angle or do something different, I can sneak something in. um, but yeah, I would say probably 20 to 30% these days.
That's pretty good.
Not bad. Yeah.
Do do you, when you take a picture, do you then look at it, or are you take a picture, move on, take another picture, and then you just review them later?
Yeah.
Or you,
Often maybe the first shot I'll take a look at. Um, just to see if I've got everything balanced. I used to
Mm.
do the same thing when I did studio work, just sort of, you take a couple test shots, make sure, okay, no, there it is. Um, then I just go and do it. And then, yeah, afterwards, I'll go back, review them. Oftentimes there'll be a photo or two I took that I remember fondly, or, that's what I was going for. So I quick go to that photo, did it turn out? Did I get it?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I try not to look at what I'm shooting too often, simply because it just takes you out of the moment.
Mm. Yeah, the moment. That's one thing I learned of taking pictures, especially during traveling across the US in an RV, was there are times where you get the perfect picture and you might be lucky enough to have the camera ready.
Right.
And then there are times where you have the perfect picture and you know you're not going to get it
Yeah.
because that moment is going to pass. And I think I'm not I wouldn't call myself a photographer. I like to take pictures, but just having that feeling is kind of like the spidey sense when you're driving up, or you're driving down into Denver from the higher lands there from up north, and you're driving down south into Denver. And you're like, oh, this is going to be a good picture coming up.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's because I've driven that road before or I've seen something like that before, or if it's just enough of missing the moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to be ready for this moment
Mhm.
when the light hits right, when I go around this corner or whatever.
Well, I can tell you,
What do
I,
you think about
I'm
that?
I'm still haunted by photos I haven't taken. I can
Mm,
still remember a few going back, I mean, 30 years. I remember in New Orleans, a photo I missed. I was same sort of thing. Came across it. Oh, this is a great photo. By the time I got the camera ready, it's gone.
yeah.
Um, there's other times, as you said, yeah. I mean, I'll be in a location and I'm like, in an hour, the lighting here is going to be incredible. So I'm just going to sort of wander around, do my thing, just look around, take a few random shots, but I'm going to be ready, because it's just, if you can do that, it's very nice. Sometimes with travel, yeah, I remember I was in central Vietnam. There are these ruins that it takes you like a 2-hour bus ride to get to. And, by the time we got there, it was just pouring rain and really bad lighting. And we're only going to be there for maybe 2 hours. And so it's just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to hope this rain breaks, and I'm just going to, once it does, I'm going to dive in and do what I can do. And I can't guarantee anything. Versus those other times where, I've got the whole day. And as I mentioned, the lighting's going to be better in an hour. Um, so let's just sort of, wait for it. Sometimes you'll see street photography that's done that way. You sort of find that perfect angle, perfect framing, but then you got to wait for the right person to walk into it. You
Mhm.
know, and so sometimes you're lucky and it happens quickly, and sometimes you're standing there for 30 minutes. Like, damn it, I picked the one street in London no one walks on.
Yeah. Where's
Uh,
that guy with the umbrella?
exactly. Where's that umbrella when I need one?
Yeah.
Uh, so no, it varies, but like I said, I do think experience helps. And the more, I guess I sort of, I like to say, like I was at this animal market in Kashgar, which is the furthest west you can be in China, and this livestock market's been happening since like the time of Marco Polo every
Mm,
Sunday. And so I just switched into street photography mode, because for me, street photography mode means I know the settings on my camera, and, I'm going to use a prime lens, which focuses quickly. And I'm going to, my trick in a situation like that goes back to my old days in film. I center focus and then I readjust. So, I want you in focus, you're to the left. So I focus on you first, then I shift the lens a little. And,
mm,
for me, that's street photography mode. And I'm just sort of like, I'm looking for moments. I'm trying to capture it very quickly. Just move, go, move, go. There's landscape, that's different. There I want to take my time. If I have a tripod, I'll use it. And then, again, maybe I'll wait for the lighting. I'll kind of look up, oh, if this cloud breaks, the sun's going to cut through. This is going to be a beautiful photo. Uh, so, it depends upon the situation. But again, I've done enough various situations where I can kind of sort of, okay, now I'm going to switch into landscape photographer mode, and I'm going to be more aware of the light and, change my settings versus, the most recent photos you've been seeing on Instagram. Those were the last photos I took in Melbourne. It just started pouring with rain. And so I'm on a bus heading back to the hotel. And I just thought, I'm going to just be a little creative and I'm going to focus on the raindrops and, sort of do some impressionistic photos. Everyone's got an umbrella, and just, do some in color and do some in black and white. And, so again, that's a different way of thinking. I have to create an f-stop that gives me enough definition that you can see what's going on in the background, but not enough. So I still want it to be a little impressionistic. I need to manually focus so I can make sure I'm just focusing on the raindrops. So for me, it's just, I've done things like that over the years. So I just changed my mode. This is what I need to shoot now. And then, if the rain breaks, I'll head back out and try something else.
Yeah, I like a good rainy windshield pick where you're focused on the windshield and you got something going on. I mean, that to me is the essence of travel.
Yes.
So
you need to include the elements. It's not always sunny and nice when you travel.
End up with a lot of point perspectives just because it's a lot of taking pictures on the road. So it's the road. But
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that the creative force of photography and writing are the same?
Interesting question. I mean, for me, I've always been creative. Let me rephrase that. I've always had creative outlets. So whether it be writing or photography, or I used to compose music, I still play guitar. So to me, it's just sort of, there's a general sort of pull. So for instance, when, COVID hit, I'm out here in California, we had a lockdown pretty much. And I'm just like, okay, my main creative outlet is photography, and that's done through travel, and that's done. So instead, what I did was each day I took what I called a shelter-in-place still life. So I just grabbed the camera and I'd take a creative shot around the house, often of things I picked up in my travels. I had no idea what it was going to be, just grab the camera and go. I grabbed the guitar. I hadn't written or composed anything in years. I started writing what I called quarantine compositions. I need something. All of that said, I do feel, again, I sort of separate them. Photography is my visual outlet. My father was an artist when I was younger. I tried painting, I tried drawing. I wasn't particularly good or enjoyed either of those. I was writing, I enjoyed that. But then when photography came, it was sort of like, okay, here's that visual creative outlet I was looking for. And so now let me, and like I said, I feel very fortunate because, as I said, I was taught on film with a fully manual camera. So, I have to pick the f-stop, the shutter speed, the ISO, or the film determines the ISO. But, it just sort of teaches you, it's not just, today you can do some great work with digital cameras, even with your phone, just keep it on auto. But for me, it was more about, learning aperture and, how much do you want to blur the background, or do you want the background all in focus? Or shutter speed. Do I want to incorporate a little motion, or do I want to make sure I freeze motion? So, those are different thoughts than I would ever have writing, for instance. Writing, the travel writing is more research based. It's more, like I said, remembering conversations or interesting scenes. So to me, it's enjoyable to do both because it kind of flexes different creative muscles, as it were. And so, I think I know Paul Theroux, a famous travel writer, his first book, he made note that, he intentionally does not travel with a camera because then he's forced to describe the scenes and, paint pictures through words. Whereas for me, I feel fortunate because I can, I'm including a photo of what I'm talking about. So I don't necessarily need to go into all the detail because you can see it. Instead, maybe I'll give you a little history behind it, or why it's this color or why it's this shape. So for me, it's a nice combination.
Do you think that creativity is something that we develop within ourselves, like we manifest it from our experiences, or do you think it's something that's a force outside of us, like the Romans would call genius? Not that the person is the genius, but the creativity is the genius and it works through the person? Or can it be a mix of that?
Yeah, I would think probably a mix. I mean, I do believe that we all have creativity within us. It's just some people, pursue it, focus it. Others, and also, we tend to think of creativity in terms of art or music. But I have known some incredibly creative. I knew an incredibly creative mechanic, for instance, years ago. If no one could figure out what was wrong with your car, this guy could. It may take him a week, but he'll figure it out. Or people who do coding, just they knew a way to do it, and it was incredibly elegant. And I consider all of that creative. So I think it's just sort of you sort of have that creative spark, but then what do you do with it? Because I think on the other hand, so for instance, with the photography, as I said, I've been doing it for a long time. But I'm always looking to improve. I'm always looking to try something new. I follow certain photographers because I like how they see things, and it's not a question of mimicry. It's just I would never have thought of shooting from that angle. So let me just sort of put that in the back of my mind. If I come across that situation in the future, maybe I'll try something similar. Or the same thing with the writing. Each of my books so far have been very different from each other, and it would have been very easy. I write the first book, which is this collection of travel tales. It does rather well. People seem to be enjoying it. I could have just written a second volume. And I probably should have, to be honest with you, but I decided to go in a different direction with the next book, and then this different direction with the third book. But for me, it's just like that's more interesting. I'm trying something new rather than writing about the past. I'm writing about the present. Rather than short little tales, I'm writing about a full experience. So for me, it's just you need to figure out ways to challenge yourself. Sometimes limitations are good. I remember years ago, I went to the Palm Springs Film Festival, and there was this film. So a noted director uh, challenged another noted director to like refilm this famous short film of his, but he placed restrictions on him. So, for instance, the first film, no shot could be more than a half a second. And then the next film had this requirement. One film was going to be animated. And the interesting thing is, while this director was complaining all the time, I know nothing about animation, or what in the world could I do with a half-second shot? It was finally when he said, okay, now I redo it, no restrictions, no limitations, just do whatever you want. That was when he was most stumped
Mm.
because all the challenges it had made him think differently and had to approach things differently. And so for me, like I said, sometimes traveling with just a few lenses, maybe okay, I went out, ooh, I was wrong, I should have brought a different lens with me today, but now I just have to challenge myself. And to me, that's sort of like that's when you take the creativity and then ramp it up a little. Okay, I brought the wrong lens today, but let's just see what I can do with the lens I have. And then, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. So like I said, yeah, I think it's a combination. I think, I don't know where it comes from. Uh, and I think, some I think are more creative than others, or have been able to, get more from it. Um, But I think if you have it, embrace it, and in whatever form it's in. I said I feel fortunate. I enjoy creating. So if the writing isn't working, I'll edit some photos. If that's not working, I grab the guitar. I just enjoy creating things, even if I'm not going to do anything with it. I just enjoy, you know, starting with nothing and just seeing what happens.
Yeah, I think that creativity, or maybe the product of creativity, it's a different recipe for everybody.
Yes.
And the developing that photographic eye, how did how did you do that? Did you just figure out, like, is there just this natural ability, or what do you attribute it to, of being able to take a picture and then step back and go, that's a good picture? Like, how do you know a good picture from a bad picture of the ones you've taken when you're reviewing them and you
Gotcha.
have 1,000 pictures and you're just going through? How do you go, oh, that's the one? How does that jump out?
Well, in terms of developing it, for me, it was, when I first started off, I really was into light, shadow, and texture. So that's what I mostly photographed. And then at one point, I realized, that's nice. And I enjoy that. And I said, "No, it still catches my eye, I won't lie. But I need to expand a little beyond this. So so then I started thinking about leading lines, foreground, things like that. So let me expand. And then when I very first started traveling, I was really good at, I could go to a really busy location, but make it look as if no one was there. I would just, for some reason, that was my thing. So I just would find an angle or find a moment, and take these photos. There's hardly anybody if no one in them. And then again, sort of evolution. I realized one day, but I'm really missing something. A
Mm.
big part of a location are the people. So I actually went out to LA with a photographer, sort of helped me develop an eye for street photography. And I also started doing some model work, shooting models in uh, studios, just to sort of just get comfortable working with people, seeing lights. So that was sort of the next evolution. So that now, okay, I'm missing something by not including people in my photos or not doing things like that. So it just sort of builds. So all of that said, as I'm taking photos, I'm trying to, if you do look through a set of photos of mine, you will sometimes see, like, I'll take two or three of the same location, and at first glance, they may look very similar. But for me, it's just like I I want this certain leading line, so it needs to go off, let's say, the bottom right of the photo. And so maybe the first shot I took, it didn't quite do that, or someone walked into the shot, or maybe I'm trying to get something illuminated. So it's just sort of in my mind, I sort of like look at the scene. I think it should be shot this way. I remember I was in a courtyard once, and there's just this beautiful shadow on what would be the foreground of this photo. That's what drew my eye. But now it's going to make it an interesting shot. That can't just be it. So then I just try to look around, or I said maybe I go a little lower, maybe I go a little higher. So to me, I think a photo needs to be engaging, right from the start. Uh, Sting, the musician, used to be with the Police. I saw an interview with him recently. He was saying, a song has to catch his attention in like the first 10 seconds, or he just moves on. And I sort of feel that way with photography. There needs to be something, either the way it was angled, or the juxtaposition of the colors, or maybe it's a composition you wouldn't normally think of. I tend to avoid putting things in the center. I tend to avoid symmetry, because I find, while there's times for that, but in general, I find, no, if I kind of change a little bit, move it off to one side, or maybe I do vertical when you would think to shoot horizontal, it just adds an extra element, because I'm hoping then, when someone goes through the photos, it'll, stop them. Something will catch their eye. Uh, and the same thing happens with me as I'm going back through the photos. You know, it's like, oh, that one, that's an interesting angle, or I caught a moment this person was smiling, or the interesting thing with street photography is sometimes someone sees you taking their picture. And so I remember I was in Europe and I was taking a picture of a bus. I was just wasn't necessarily anybody on the bus. It was sort of a rainy day, made for an interesting shot, took it. When I got home, I realized the girl in the right corner saw me and flashed me the peace symbol, and I actually liked that. I kept her in. It's like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Nice.
So just it's being open to that, and just things can change, but I need to do something that will just make someone stop. We see so many photos on a daily basis. What's going to make you stop? And maybe, like I said, there's a number of things it can be. I do, as I said, I do try to pre-visualize. I do try to keep those things in mind as I'm photographing. But also sometimes you'll just be surprised, or sometimes a photo I didn't think worked, I'll look at later and go, oh, actually, this one didn't turn out as bad as I thought.
When you're looking at photos and reviewing them, do you review them on the camera or do you do it on a larger screen?
Yeah, I do them on a larger screen. I use a program called Bridge. It comes with Adobe. Because as I said, sometimes on if you look at the back of the camera, either you think you got a better photo than you did, and then when you see it bigger, you realize, oh, it was out of focus or something went wrong. But conversely, sometimes I look at the back, oh, that didn't really work out, but I never delete until I review. Because sometimes you realize, oh, wait, actually, now that I see it larger. So no, that to me, back in the days of film, you could develop the negatives, do a shot that had all 24 photos in it and kind of look it over and see. With the computer, it's particularly nice because you can change the size, you can make them bigger. So to me, it's like I never know for sure until I've reviewed them on a larger screen, and then even then I rarely delete unless it's a really just it didn't work out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is you delete? I'd
Yeah,
expect to have
very rare.
like,
Occasionally, if it's just this, I will tell you one thing that's odd about my Z6 is I don't know if it's because it's like the first generation, but occasionally it just takes a photo. Often it's dangling from my neck. It'll just like shoot my feet. I don't know why. So
creativity.
those get deleted.
Oh,
But I did, after I was deleting them, I did think I probably should do a series of just
yeah, that's a whole
random
book in
Z6
itself.
photos. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Going back to when you're reviewing them, are you putting each one up there and looking at it, or are you scrolling through and going, okay, this one?
Yeah, I scroll through. So I have it set up where there are like two columns, not too big. And then when you click on one, you see a bigger version. And so that way I can kind of go through them quickly. So as I mentioned, article I'm working on, it's about this ghost town in Namibia. And I mentioned this bathtub that's sitting on a dune. That's just very interesting. And then I realized, the photos I had edited and was going to include with it, none of them included that. So, I know I did it. Quick, can go back. Or I remember a certain location. So I was in London not too long ago. Some of their tube stations, from a architectural perspective, are really interesting. So the time I had been before, I did Canary Wharf, took a series I really liked. So this time I went to King's Cross, and there's this certain architectural element if there's sun. So it gives you this reflection on the ground. It's just very striking. I've seen several photographers do it. I wanted to try my hand at it. Now it's London, so sun is not a guarantee. Thankfully, I was there. I was scoping it out, taking some photos, and then the sun came out. So quick rush, get to this location, kind of position myself where I think it's best. maybe take a dozen, 20 photos. So same thing, bring them up, head to those 20. It's a metro station, so there's a lot of people going in and out, which is an added element. Sometimes maybe you framed it right, but it just doesn't look right, the positioning of the people. And just kind of go through it. I don't need 20 photos that are very similar, but if I can find one or two that are really striking, though sometimes I will admit I do get a little excited. So I remember that set. I edited the first photo, really, really liked it. And then I moved to the next photo and went, oh, actually, that one's that one's better. I remember now the first photo I took, but I realized there was an angle I cut off. And so I added it. That's why the second one's better. Okay, well, I know how to edit it now because I just did the first edit. Yeah, because for me, I like to go fairly quick. If I'm not editing while I'm traveling, I'll start as soon as I get home. That said, I do also sometimes enjoy going back. Maybe 6 months later, I'll go back. Maybe there was something that didn't catch my eye the first time, or maybe sometimes I'll try. I had a photo in mind in black and white, and then I'll go back to it and realize actually this would be quite nice in color. There was a photo that was in my last book. It started life as a black and white. That's what I had in mind when I took it. And then when I was putting together the book, I looked at the photo again and I just thought, this is actually quite nice in color. Let me try that. And then, the published version was the color version, because sometimes you have it in mind and it's exactly what you think. And sometimes you realize, no, actually, or vice versa. I had a shot I thought I was going to do in color, and actually, no, the black and white works better. Something I pull something out that the color didn't, or removes a distraction I didn't want to be there.
Yeah, I like the stripping down of it, especially when you're learning photography. If you're doing a formal study of it, or I guess just on your own, if you limit yourself, again, putting in those limits of you need to go take some interesting black and white photos and build that up so you can appreciate lighting and texture. And that makes sense to me. What's the difference? Go ahead.
Oh no, back when I was doing film and shooting mostly black and white, one of the things that helped me is I used a red filter, because a red filter on the lens increases contrast, but it also takes color out of the situation. So you're really now focusing strictly on light, shadow, composition, and to me that was a huge benefit, because sometimes color can be a distraction. Whereas other times it's exactly what you want. But to me, that was a great way of learning, because there are a few camera manufacturers like Leica that make monochrome cameras. They only shoot in black and white. I've contemplated it. The only thing that keeps me from it is price. But it's a good way to learn, because it just sort of if color weren't here, what is drawing me to this picture? Why do I want to take it? And I said, sometimes it is the color. Sometimes it is, oh, this pink dress against this green background is really striking, so this is what I want to do. But other times, particularly in composition, anyone starting out, I mean, one of the things I would highly recommend is, and I do this myself sometimes, is like, I'm just going to go out with a 50mm lens today. And it may not be wide enough for some shots, and it may not be enough zoom for others. I just maybe go around the neighborhood, or find an interesting location near where I live. And there's a challenge I remember reading years ago, was 1 camera, 1 lens, 1 block, 1 hour. And I really like that. Just sort of just what can you do? And you may come back with nothing. It may just be horrible, but it challenges you to think. And you're the same thing. Or maybe I'm, on the day I should have a big zoom, I have the wide angle. What can I do? So I find that's a good way to teach yourself. And also you start to see, like I said, when I shoot wide angle, I'm incorporating more in the shot. So I become more aware, like I said, leading lines, foreground, negative space. Whereas if I'm zooming, okay, that's a little different. So, I'm drawing your attention to one particular subject. Uh, or even when you're doing something with a lower aperture and you want to blur the background, but the background still needs to be visually appealing. So if it's like clearly a trash can in the background, it doesn't, you know, reposition it, rethink, even when sometimes I do macro flower photography, and same thing. It's like I'm focused on this flower, it's in the foreground, but the background needs to be visually appealing as well. So I'm
Yeah.
not just going to snap and take it. I've got to think about, oh, now I see the stem going back and it's curving off to the right. Yeah, that's, even though it's blurred, that's going to be visually much more appealing than if I shot it this other way.
When you find yourself walking around the yard with a piece of poster board to put behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Been there. What's the difference between the classic striking photo or elements in a photo and just being different? Like if you're judging a photo contest and it's a photo contest of the Statue of Liberty,
Mm.
and is there something that photographers know or through experience or the human eye or whatever, where you can look at something and go, okay, I've seen 1,000 pictures of the same thing, a lot of them the same angle, and then this other one's a different angle. Is it better just because it's different, or is it something more interesting about it? Like if you had 1,000 photos just straight on of the Statue of Liberty, and then you had one kind of off to the angle, you go, well, it's different, but is it better? What if you had 1,000 straight on and 1,000 from this other one? Are you going to be able to pick out one that is more striking and be able to say it's more striking because of these things?
Yeah, for me, so example I can give you. So Christ the Redeemer in Rio
Mm.
was one of those. Okay, I've seen thousands of photos. So when I go, I'm just like, so one, I have those photos in my mind. I want to try something different. Uh, um, Same thing in Paris. There's certain things you see over and over. I want to try something different. But Christ the Redeemer. So basically, the idea was, okay, I'm going to look at it from afar. Maybe halfway up the steps, right at the foot of it. What about the side? What about behind? What's the view behind Christ the Redeemer? Uh, Also, there's going to be a lot of people walking around. Do I want to include them? Will they be interesting? Um, so it just sort of becomes, and then for me, and then what clicks for me? I can try, as you said, I can try something different. I can try a different angle, but it doesn't necessarily make it a good photo. It's just, to me, it still needs to be engaging. And it still needs to catch the eye. Um, I was, again, in Africa, I was Ivory Coast, I believe. No, I'm sorry, Senegal. I was in Senegal, and there's this huge statue that we stopped at, and same sort of thing. It's like, okay, now I've not seen a lot of photos of this statue, um, but just looking at it, okay, I can do a straight on, I can zoom in on it, I can include the stairway. I'm taking some photos. I'm not quite sure if any of these are making sense. And then I noticed there was a group, maybe like a school group, had traveled there, and they went halfway up the stairs, and then they all lined up to have their photo taken with the statue in the background. And I thought, there's my photo. I want this photo. They're going to be at the base of the photo, all lined up having their photo taken. And then I include the rest of the stairway. I include this huge statue in the background. They're far enough away that, you can't make them out individually. But that to me was an interesting, that's sort of, it only happened when I was there. Someone may have taken something similar, but it won't be this exact photo. They're like holding up a banner. I just thought, to me, that's the great photo. Or the Christ the Redeemer. I took a photo sort of halfway along the side, very close. I thought the angle just worked out really well. And so, Eiffel Tower, same thing. I kind of got closer to it. I took an angle sort of where you're going up one of the pillars. You follow the angle up. To me, that was interesting. I hadn't seen a shot quite like that. So end of the day, it's got to be whatever interests the photographer. Because like I said, I can try different angles. I can try shooting directly underneath something, but if I don't feel it, then I don't really think the viewer is going to feel it. I just recommend, trying it. Occasionally I will take the classic photo because at least, hey, I've been here, I've seen it, I can prove it. But yeah, to me, it's just walking around, trying different angles. Or like I said, with the Statue of Liberty, it could just be, you could take that classic photo, but if you took it at sunrise or sunset, or there's a storm in the background, maybe that's that extra element you needed. Maybe you didn't have to go crazy with angles. You see that in landscape photography a lot. You get that beautiful sky, and let's say it's reflecting on a lake. It just sort of elevates that scene, versus if you went there midday when the sun's out, you could have taken the exact same photo, but it just, that was the missing element.
Yeah, that golden hour or the green hour, all those
Exactly.
things I really like it when, and I think everybody can see it that can see. It just, maybe they don't notice it, or they don't understand how it is when it's different. Like if you're sitting on the sofa and you look out of the window and it just looks different because the way the sun's hitting it, the way the clouds are, or whatever, and you just know this is the time to take some pictures outside. This is good picture taking. And I wonder if it's because it's different. That's what makes it special, or is it something else that talks to you as a person viewing it and just being there and going, oh, this is special because it doesn't happen often? Or is there more to it? I don't know how to explain it. And there's other times that I've seen things from, whether it's during an eclipse or during the golden hour, sunset, sunrise, right after the rain, in the storm, things like that. Do you have a particular time that you look for, and maybe you've named it yourself, of this special time where the light's just right, or maybe the lack of light is just right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it depends on the situation. So for instance, if you're doing street photography, sunrise, sunset is really the worst time to do it. You want, bright sky. You want not necessarily noon. I like to have a little shadow. So maybe 10 a.m., 2 p.m. It also depends upon the location. If I'm somewhere, like New York, where you've got lots of skyscrapers, unless you're right at noon, half the road's going to be in shadow. So maybe noon's a good time to do that. Versus other locations, I was in north of Bali, and same thing. That was one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. It was helped because of the black sand beach. That kind of gave you some distinction and sense of location. But to me, it's really a question of, I like shadows, and I like interplay of light and shadow. Like I said, that's an early love of mine. So to me, I can kind of look at a situation and see, okay, where is the sun going to be now? Where is the sun going to be in 30 minutes? Is it going to be better? I was in a cab in Seattle once, driving, being taken somewhere. And as we were driving, I just happened to glance, saw this coffee shop, which obviously they're known for, not Starbucks. But the building was beautiful and had this mural on the side. And I'm just like, mental note, I must return here. Right now it's in too much sun. It'd be nice if I had a little shadow. So I went back to that location like 2 hours later. And then, okay, here's how it needs to be framed. Here's what I saw in my mind. And again, now I've got to wait for someone interesting to walk into this shot. And the way I've framed it, there's some shadow off to the side. But if they hit this spot, they're still going to be in the light walking into the shadow. It's that sort of thing that goes through your mind. I was fortunate that I could do that, because sometimes, I'm here at 2:00. Here's the light, live with it, But to me, it's like I said, it kind of goes back to, I'm also aware someone's going to be viewing this photo. And so if I find it visually striking, then I'm hoping that will be conveyed to the viewer. So as you said, you're sitting on your couch and you suddenly notice this light outside and it draws you. That's probably a very good time to grab the camera, because if it's drawing your attention, it will probably draw someone else's attention. Now, that's not to say, there's times you can photograph like middle of the day and still get something really nice. Or there's times, like I said, if it's really overcast and the light's not very well, or there's no cloud in the sky. If there's no cloud in the sky, I tend to do like architectural details, because I zoom in a little closer because there's not much going on in the sky. If it's really overcast, maybe I'll include a bit more of the sky because I can pull out some details, and so suddenly the sky is a dramatic element in the shot. So to me, it's just end of the day, what catches my eye, and what catches my eye will be different than what catches your eye. But if we can do it in such a way that the general viewer can look and say, oh, and maybe what catches their eye isn't, what initially caught my eye. I was doing an interview a while back, a photo I took in Tibet, and it was funny. He was describing this photo and he left out this one particular element because I think he wanted me to talk about it. And so when I mentioned, that's why I took the photo, it was that monk in the left corner on the cell phone. And he said, yeah, that was the best part of that photo. That's what caught my eye. It's just things like that sometimes just happen. It's just like, that was interesting. Now, how can I compose a shot? I don't want to just zoom in on him. I didn't think that was too interesting. But, that photo, he's off in the corner. And then the main photo, there's these huge prayer wheels, and there's these two old Tibetan women spinning the wheels. And it just made this wonderful juxtaposition of, they're there exploring their faith, and then there's this monk on a cell phone. And to me, that was that's what caught my eye. And I was glad to hear him mention that, because like, okay, that works. That's why I took that photo. You saw it too. I appreciate that.
Nice. What is the best way for people to see your photos?
The best way is if you go to my website, which is jeremiahgilbert.com. You can click on portfolio, where I break it down into black and white, street, travel, or the very bottom of the homepage is a link to my Instagram, which is JG_travels. So I sort of approach both differently. So the website, if you go to updates or news, that's sort of where I'm telling. So right now you'll see a series of photos from the Namibian ghost town. I went to a township also in Namibia. Then right now I'm posting the Sao Tome photos, and I tell the story behind them. Whereas Instagram, as I mentioned, I'm just in a few days going to shift to the African photos. But there it's more just about individual photos. So, if you want the story behind them and you want to see like a series of photos together, I do that on the website. If you just want to see individual photos with a little bit of background, that's what I do on Instagram.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Your website and your Instagram links are in the show notes, so people can go there if they didn't catch them or write them down. Like I said, I follow the Instagram one. I like it. I'm going to look up those train ones too, see what's up there. But wow, photography. And your books are available. You can go through your website to get them?
Yes. So again, go to the jeremiahgilbert.com, click on books. Each one has a link to Instagram, or it's not Instagram, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, or a few other options if you prefer. I say, the most recent book is the Return to Travel. It's called On to Plan C, because basically, that it takes its title from that summer, when again trying to return to travel, and Plan A was this African trip I just did. It fell through. A few countries like Ghana just decided, nope, we don't want visitors. So then I changed to North a European trip that was going to include St. Petersburg. Russia decided to invade Ukraine. Okay, that's off. So the summer trip was literally Plan C. And I thought that kind of, encapsulated the whole notion of travel in 2022 because, the first trip was to Fiji and, on like a weekly basis, testing requirements were changing, entry requirements were changing, fortunately for the better, but you just didn't know. So I thought that was an interesting time to sort of capture what it was like. And, the first book, I said that one's the travel tales. So if you just want to brief snippets from 15 years of travel, I mentioned a few of the situations. So include in there, how I met my wife, which was a trip I wasn't supposed to be on, and I almost didn't make it. And then my luggage was lost, and it was interesting. Turned into an interesting ordeal, but I came back with a wife, so it worked out.
Yeah, that's not bad. It's a trade.
Yeah, I'll accept that. I can live with that. Yeah.
All right. So, like I said, the links are in the show notes for people to check out. And I'm going to talk to you after this about those railroad ones and some other things. But any thoughts or ideas in closing? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
Oh, I would just want to say, one of the things I try to do is just, I hope, looking at my photos or reading what I write, sort of inspires people to get out there. It doesn't have to be as big or remote as I tend to do. Post COVID, my wife and I spent a year doing sort of staycations, as it were. We drove around. I tried to stay within an hour and a half of home. But the trick was, so for instance, we stayed at a vineyard in Temecula, which is only about an hour's drive from where I live. But rather than take the highway, I took surface streets. And I'm a California native. I've born and raised very near where I still live. And I came across the lake I didn't know existed. I passed through some towns I'd never been to. So just that sort of openness of just getting out there and seeing. I said, if you want to get into photography, I photograph everything. I can now take fewer photos because I have a lot of experience. I know what I'm looking at. When you first start off, see, shoot from the ground, shoot from the hip, jump in the air, just see what works for you. Give yourself some challenges. Walk out with a 300 millimeter lens and try to do street photography, because that's not the lens you want for street photography. But hey, maybe you'll do something. Because to me, I just find it's, I like to just try to challenge myself, and I tend to include some technical specs with my posts, just in case if someone's interested, they want to know. And if I didn't, they can always ask me, how did I get that photo? In fact, the next book I'm working on is going to be a circumnavigation around the world, starting in LA, heading east. And what I'm doing in that book is I'm giving a little background about the location, but then I'm also giving some insights into how I took the photo, what I was thinking, how I composed it, or what caught my eye, along with the technical settings, because I'm often asked about that. And so I thought, this could be interesting. If you're just interested in the photos, you've got a photo book. But if you'd like to know, how in the world did he get that angle, or how did he shoot, it's, I sometimes visit classrooms. I know a photography professor invites me to her class a few times, and I try to do that. Share some information. Remember one photo I showed, I told them where what my focal point was, and one student was like, "But you got this other thing in focus, and that's what really caught my eye." And I'm like, "That was pure luck. That was not what I was focusing on. I got lucky in that case." So I think it's just it's, if I can inspire people to travel, even domestically, there's some beautiful things here in the U.S. That I still haven't gotten to. And like I said, I'm 53. I just turned 53. I spent my life here in Southern California. I'm still finding things, I hadn't seen before. Um, so, get out there. There's so many options now with cameras. I'm not a fan of camera phones, uh, but that's pretty much all my wife uses these days. You know, and to me, I'm not opposed to a phone taking a photo. I like a certain feel of the camera in the hand, and I like to adjust the lens. I like having dials. That's just a personal thing. You can take some incredible stuff with your phone now, and as you said, then you always have the camera with you. And so and that's happened to me a couple times. In the time it would take me to get the camera out and get adjusted, I'm going to miss this shot, so I'm just going to whip out the cell phone and get something. Uh,
Hmm.
so just do what you can at the end of the day, and just if it's a huge world. I always feel humbled whenever I travel. It changes my perspectives. I see how other people live. And there's nothing like making your home feel incredibly welcoming until you've traveled. This last trip, I'm just like, I just cannot wait to sleep in my bed and take a shower in my shower. I'm just
Hmm.
like, because nothing has been as nice as home in that regard. You become very appreciative of what you have.
No place like home.
Exactly. End of the day.
All right. Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you at the end of this musical exit here.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.